This is Pre-Algebra Lesson 45, Circle Graphs. Today we're going to construct a circle graph and make predictions and inferences given the data sets that are displayed in those circle graphs. This is Objective 8.13 for Virginia SOL. All right, so when we're talking about circle graphs, these are graphs that display the data as part of the whole. So we're looking at percentages, where the circle, the pie, is the whole piece. So when we add the parts together, the sum of the parts of the circle graph, they will all add up to 100%. And then the size of each of the sections, or the wedges within that pie, are then proportional to the fraction or the percent of the data that data piece represents. Okay? Go ahead and pause the video now and copy this into your notebook. Excellent. All right. Well, now we're going to talk about this set of data that we have here. This is where a sports radio station asked its local listeners about their favorite football teams. All right. So here the circle graph has already been constructed for us, and we can use some benchmark pieces of data to help us identify the circle graph and how many parts. For instance, if you had a part that was going all the way down, let me get this highlighter going for us. If it went straight down, that line would represent about 50% of our data, okay? But we don't have, so none of our lines are showing that. We see there are other parts that we have though. And if we look at, let me get rid of this line here. Another way that we could look at or interpret data is by trying to figure out 25%. 25% of the whole would be about 1/4 or 1/4 of the circle. And if we see here, this piece right here, the Steelers piece, says it's 22%. So that's about close to 1/4. So that would look like this, and then a right angle, so maybe up just a little bit more straight. So 22%, the line that they gave us, is slightly less than that, 25%. So again, using these as benchmarks, it really helps identify what we're looking at when we're trying to create our own graph or whatnot. But today what we're going to do is interpret the data that we are given. Okay, so it says what percentage chose either the Redskins or the Jets. Okay, so the Redskins was 10%. And the Jets, remember when we were doing our probability unit, we learned that when they're talking about more than one item, when they're saying or, that we're talking about adding those together. Okay, so the Redskins or the Jets, so the Redskins was 10%, the Jets was 13%. So if we add those together, we're going to get 23%. Very good. All right, now the next one. Were the Cowboys and the Broncos picked more than the Eagles and the Steelers, or were they equal favorites? Well, they did a very easy job here because they already combined them. So were the Cowboys and the Broncos, so if we put those together. So the Cowboys, we don't know how much the Cowboys are, and the Broncos is 12%, versus the Eagles, which is 15%, and the Steelers, 22%. All right, well, let's do some calculation. The Steelers and the Eagles combined is going to be 37%. All right. And now we don't know the Cowboys. So how could we get the value for the Cowboys? That's right. We're going to subtract. We can add everything up, and we can subtract. We can add up all of these parts that were given to us and subtract it from 100 to find the Cowboys, however you want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go onto the calculator, and I'm going to add up all of my values. 10%, 22%, 12%, 13%, and 15%. That gives me 72%. And if I take that away from 100%, that leaves me with the Cowboys being 28%. That would make the whole thing equal 100. And as we were talking earlier, if we were creating a benchmark or trying to see what we had, remember 25% is going to be 1/4 of your circle graph. So that would be roughly like that. And you can see that from here to there. Let me grab a different marker. From this line to this line is a small wedge more, which would make it a little bit higher than 25%. So that seems like that's about right. Okay. So let's go back and let's talk about this. So how much were the Cowboys and the Broncos? So the Cowboys was 28 and the Broncos were 12. So that makes that a total of that one would be 40%. So who was more likely? I'm going to abbreviate here. I'm going to say the Cowboys and the Broncos. All right, excellent. Next, if there were 400 listeners that were polled, how many picked the Steelers to be theirs? Well, there's several different ways that we could find the answer to this. My favorite way would be setting it up to be a proportion because we have part of the whole, right? So we know if we have part to the whole, we don't know what part, so that will be our variable that's missing. The whole is our 400. And it's equal to 22% out of 100. All right, if you do your cross multiplication, so again, with cross multiplication, you're going to multiply the two numbers that are given to you that are opposite each other. So in this case, we're going to multiply 400 times 22, and we would get 8,000. Let me get a pen. We're going to get 8,800. And then we're going to divide that by the leftover number, which is 100 in this case. So if we divide that by 100, we're going to get 88. So if there were 400 listeners, 88 of them would pick the Steelers. Okay? So let's see. Let's think about, does that make sense? So 400, if we split our circle into 4 parts, that would be... let me show you what that would look like. If we split it into 4 parts, we already said, here we go, we're doing that, and then we're doing that. So then we would have 25, 25, 25, and 25. We already said the Cowboys is a little bit more. The Steelers is close to that, a little bit less. All right, so it's a little bit less. So if we broke it up, if we did 400 into 4 parts, that means each section would be roughly 100. Since we have 22%, that's slightly less than 25, a little bit less than 100. 88, is that close to it? Seems pretty close, so we're going to go ahead and say, yep, we're happy with that answer. All right, the next one. Between the Cowboys and the Broncos, which team was more popular, or were they equally popular? Well, we've already done the work that we needed to. So we have the Broncos as 12%, and we have the Cowboys as 28%. Oh, folks, this is not even a close one, is it? Unfortunately, my poor Broncos, I love them. So it looks like the Cowboys were definitely the more popular team, according to this survey. So this is going to be the Cowboys. All right. And lastly, combined, which 2 teams did the greatest number of listeners choose? So we're looking for the 2 largest wedges of our circle graph. And if you're looking carefully, or you've maybe noticed by now, they would be the Steelers and the Cowboys. So then our answer to this one, we could put down the Steelers and the Cowboys. Very good. I know many of you are going to be happy to hear this information, right? Okay, excellent. All right, so tonight I would like for you to do this question. Mr. Thomas asked his classes to vote on where they would like to go on a field trip. The choices he gave them were the History Museum, the Science Museum, Art Gallery, and Nature Preserve. All of the 97 students cast 1 vote each. Use the data in the circle graph to answer the question. I would like for you to copy the graph and the questions and fill out your part. Based on the percents, you need to round to the nearest whole number. Since we're talking about people here, we don't want any half numbers, no decimal numbers, okay? Excellent. Have a good night. We'll talk to you later.